Have you ever faced a decision that could change the fate of a life? A life you've just encountered, weak, terrified, teetering on the edge of death. And could you place yourself in that situation, willing to sacrifice everything to save that life, knowing it might change forever, or disappear entirely? Now, imagine you are Jack McAllister, a man who has lived a life full of hardships. When a fierce snowstorm arrives, you must make a decision that not only alters the fate of a wild Mustang and the fragile foal it's protecting but also marks a major turning point in your own life. Would you dare to risk it all for the life of a creature on the brink of death, right in the middle of a brutal snowstorm? Let's dive into this dramatic story. To answer the questions above. Jack McAllister, a man in his 50s, lives alone on a small farm in the Colorado mountains. After enduring the harshest winters, he chose to live far from the noisy world of the city, seeking peace among the wild Mustang horses. Jack's life has been filled with difficult, often painful decisions. But after everything, his bond with these wild horses helped him find peace within himself. After the devastating loss of his beloved wife, the one he had shared the dream of a free Mustang herd with, Jack's farm is not only a sanctuary for abandoned or injured Mustangs but also a place where the most significant decisions of his life have been made. As a horse trainer, Jack feels the strength and freedom of the wild horses, but they also force him to confront battles that are not easily won, battles not just with nature, but also with his own heart. Winter has descended on the Colorado mountains, presenting not just a challenge for the horses but an unforgiving battle against the weather itself. The snowstorm has raged on for days, with sharp, cold winds whipping through the trees, causing them to bend and twist in the storm. The surroundings around Jack's farm are slowly being buried under thick layers of snow, and all signs of life seem to vanish beneath the icy, frozen blanket. Jack must fight not only to protect his horses but also to preserve his own life in this unseen battle against the bitter cold. In this harsh chill, it's not just the horses that are tested, Jack's soul is tested as well. There's nothing but the howling winds and the crunching sound of snow beneath his feet, and Jack can almost feel the loneliness building with each passing wave, like the surging storms outside. The snowstorm roared through the ranch like an unstoppable beast, its winds cutting through the air, the snow swirling in thick layers, drowning everything in an icy silence. Jack Carter stood alone in the darkness, his breath heavy in the cold air, but the emptiness inside him could not be dispelled by the storm. For years, he had learned to live with the silence left by the death of his wife, a cruel disease that took her from him too soon. The pain, a constant companion, was a wound that no time or distance could heal. And yet, despite the ferocity of the storm, a faint cry cut through the wind, sharp and desperate. It wasn't the howl of the blizzard, nor the whistling wind. No, it was the cry of a life, calling out in the dark. Jack froze, his heart pounding, sensing a familiarity that shook him to his core. The cry stirred something deep inside, a memory long buried. It felt like a call from a part of himself, raw, painful, and undeniable. He turned his flashlight toward the sound, the beam cutting through the thick snow, and there, in the desolate white, he saw it, a Mustang Mare, her gaunt body battered and scarred, lying helpless in the snow. Beside her, a foal, weak, trembling, unable to stand, clung desperately to its mother. In the mare's eyes, Jack saw despair. The same look he had seen in his wife's eyes on her deathbed, full of love and deep pain, knowing she was slipping away. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. In those eyes, he saw a reflection of himself, a soul broken by loss, yearning for something, anything to hold on to. Am I seeing myself in her eyes? Jack thought, his mind racing. This mare, this foal, were not just creatures of flesh and bone. They were him, struggling to survive, struggling to find hope. And now they were calling to him. In that moment, Jack knew what he had to do. He had lived with his grief long enough. But now, in the face of their pain, their vulnerability, he could no longer remain passive. Save them, Jack whispered to himself. It was not just about saving the horses, it was about saving himself. It was his chance to rebuild, to find life again in the act of saving another soul from the clutches of despair. Every step through the thick snow felt like a battle, not just against the unforgiving elements, but against the dark shadows of Jack's past. The storm howled around him, the wind tearing at his face, but he kept moving forward. Each step felt heavier than the last, not just from the weight of the sled, but from the weight in his chest, memories of his wife, words she once said, clinging to him like an old ghost. Every gust of wind was a reminder that he hadn't yet escaped the storm within himself. The mare, despite her severe wounds, still tried to follow. Each step was a struggle, but she didn't stop. Her eyes, though weary and filled with pain, showed a quiet resolve. The foal, still trembling, struggled to keep up. They moved together, but slowly, as if each step took everything they had. Jack felt a deep connection to them, not just as animals he needed to save, but as kindred spirits in a fight for survival. They weren't alone, Jack was with them, and that was something. Rosie, the border collie, stayed close, offering silent reassurance. Dogs like Rosie had a unique gift for calming wild horses, and her presence helped bridge the gap between man and beast. As the dog moved confidently by Jack's side, the mare seemed to sense that Rosie was not a threat. Her fear slowly started to recede, just enough for Jack to feel like they were moving in tandem, not just physically, but emotionally. They moved in slow steps, Jack pulling the sled, the mare following reluctantly, and the foal clinging to her side. The storm was relentless, but it was their fight to win, together. Jack could see it in the mare's eyes. She wasn't just a mother trying to protect her foal. She was a survivor, just like him. And they were both fighting for the same thing, life. As Jack approached the mare and foal, he could feel the weight of what he was about to ask of them. The mare, like all wild Mustangs, was naturally cautious, wary of humans, especially when she was injured and vulnerable. She recoiled at Jack's first approach, her instincts to protect herself and her foal driving her actions. She wasn't sure whether he was a friend or foe. But Jack knew that he couldn't rush her. He had to earn her trust, and that would take time. Jack stepped back, keeping a safe distance, allowing the mare to assess the situation. His flashlight illuminated her in the snow, but he made sure not to make any sudden movements. He spoke in a soft, steady voice, gentle and reassuring, the kind of voice you might use to calm a frightened child. He wasn't trying to force her, he was giving her the space she needed to understand that he wasn't a threat. Every word he spoke was carefully measured, every movement deliberate. In this moment, Jack was not just a man trying to save a horse. He was a man showing that compassion could be as strong as force, that patience could move mountains. In this delicate moment, Jack called on his dog, Rosie. The border collie was a quiet, confident presence that seemed to put the mare at ease. Wild horses, especially Mustangs, often responded better to dogs than to humans. Rosie's calm demeanor had a way of breaking down barriers, and with her by Jack's side, the mare's suspicion started to fade. Her tense posture began to soften, and Jack saw the first signs that she was willing to accept his help. Once Jack had earned enough trust to approach the mare, he knew time was against them. The storm was worsening, and the mare was too weak to move on her own. The foal was still unsteady, leaning heavily against its mother for support. Jack's mind raced as he prepared a sled and a blanket to keep the mare warm. The cold was unforgiving, and every moment mattered. With great care, Jack guided the mare onto the sled. She hesitated, trembling in fear, but she was exhausted, and survival instincts overpowered her fear. She finally allowed him to lift her, her body shuddering with pain but giving in to necessity. The cold had already begun to steal her strength, and Jack knew that getting her to shelter was their only hope. As he pulled the sled, with the mare lying on it and the foal stumbling behind, Jack felt the weight of their lives in his hands. His slow, deliberate movements spoke volumes. There was no rushing this. He couldn't push her any faster, couldn't force her to trust him. It had to be earned, slowly, step by step. At first, the mare resisted, her fear still gripping her. But the storm showed no mercy, and as the wind continued to batter them, she began to realize that she couldn't survive alone. Her desire to protect her foal warred with her fear of Jack, but the cold was seeping into her bones, and the desperation to live overcame her instincts. Slowly, she made the choice to trust him, to follow him through the storm. It wasn't a decision made lightly. It was survival. But in that moment, Jack knew that she had placed her faith in him. It was a quiet, reluctant trust, but it was trust nonetheless. As the sled moved forward, Jack felt the weight of that trust, heavy, precious, and fragile. They were walking together, not just through a storm of snow, but through the storm of life itself. The mare's trust didn't come easily. It was a slow, gradual process. At first, she relied solely on her instincts. Her primary concern was survival, her foal. But Jack's patience, his gentleness, and his refusal to force her into compliance showed her that he wasn't a threat. He wasn't just offering help, he was offering hope. By the time they reached the barn, the mare had made her choice. Her instincts to protect her foal, combined with the overwhelming exhaustion from the storm, led her to trust Jack. He had given her something unexpected: safety, warmth, and a chance to survive. And in that quiet, uncertain moment, the mare followed him into the shelter of the barn, where both mother and foal could finally rest. As Jack finally brought the mare and foal into the stable, and saw them resting safely, a strange sense of peace washed over him. Yet, in that stillness, as the storm's winds subsided, Jack realized his journey was far from over. Saving them wasn't just a fleeting act of rescue, it marked the beginning of a long, ongoing battle to reclaim himself. In that moment, Jack understood that his sacrifice wasn't only for the horses, but also to heal the wounds within himself that had long been left untouched. Redemption wasn't just about saving them, it was about saving himself, the man who had long forgotten how to love himself. The snowstorm, a relentless force, had passed, leaving a cold silence in its wake. Yet, Jack's heart was far from quiet. As he looked at the mare and foal safely resting in the barn, the weight of his actions pressed heavily on his chest. He had saved them, yes, but it was more than that. The world around him, the people in it, couldn't fathom the extent of his sacrifice. Jack had long carried the pain of losing his wife. His life had been a series of silent battles since her death, a void that nothing could fill. Saving these animals had offered him an outlet, a way to channel the grief that gnawed at his soul. But the local people, particularly Charlie, who had always been quick to judge, couldn't see it. They saw him as a man wasting his time on creatures they considered pests. Jack, Charlie had sneered one evening, his voice cold with judgment. "What's this madness? Those horses don't belong here. You're throwing your life away." The words stung, but Jack didn't flinch. He knew what he had done was right, even if no one else understood. He didn't need their approval. He needed only to know that the mare and foal had a chance to live. "I don't care if you understand," Jack had said, the resolve in his voice unwavering. "I'm doing what's right. What matters is they're alive, and that's all that matters." But that didn't mean it was easy. Charlie's disdain had only intensified. His words carried the venom of someone who didn't know the pain Jack had endured. The real sacrifice Jack had made wasn't just saving the horses, it was giving up his own peace to protect them. The days after the confrontation with Charlie felt like a still, suffocating weight pressing down on Jack. The threats and whispers of the town had reached a boiling point. But Jack knew what he had to do. He couldn't back down now, not when he had come so far, not when the mare and foal had already placed their trust in him. Then, it happened. Jack had seen the truck pull up in the distance. Charlie was back, and this time, it wasn't just words. A younger man stood with him, a rifle slung over his shoulder. The sight of the weapon made Jack's heart skip. But he knew what was coming. Charlie stepped forward, his tone dripping with contempt. "You can't save them all, Jack. This has gone too far." Jack stood firm, his body tense but resolute. This wasn't just about saving the horses anymore. It was about standing up for what he believed in. About showing that compassion, love, and sacrifice were worth fighting for, even if the world didn't understand. "If you want them, you'll have to go through me," Jack said, his voice calm yet unwavering, a barrier of quiet strength between him and the rifle. The young man took a hesitant step forward, his finger brushing against the trigger. But Jack didn't move. The air was thick with tension, but he wasn't going to give in. For a moment, the young man hesitated. The cold metal of the rifle shook in his hands as his gaze met Jack's. It wasn't the strength in Jack's stance that had stopped him, but the quiet certainty in Jack's eyes. The gun slowly lowered. Charlie glared, his pride wounded, but Jack stood his ground. The moment of crisis had passed, not with violence, but with the power of Jack's unspoken resolve. That evening, as the mare and foal rested, Jack stood at the threshold of the barn. The stillness around him was profound, but the turmoil inside him was just as powerful. He had saved them, but at what cost? He had given up everything, his time, his safety, and his peace of mind. But in return, He had gained something that had eluded him for years, a sense of purpose. Looking at the mare, Jack realized that his journey hadn't just been about saving them, it had been about saving himself. The act of rescuing the horses was not just an act of compassion, it was a symbol of redemption. Through his sacrifice, Jack had begun to heal the wounds that had festered in him since the loss of his wife. As the foal stepped closer to Jack, nudging his hand with its soft nose, Jack felt an overwhelming sense of peace. This small, fragile creature, whose life had almost been taken by the storm, was now a symbol of hope. It was in that moment, standing there, bathed in the soft glow of the barn light, that Jack understood. The true meaning of sacrifice was not about giving up something you loved, it was about giving everything to protect something that needed it. In saving the horses, Jack had found a new purpose, one that went beyond survival. It was a purpose that connected him to life in a way he hadn't experienced since his wife's passing. The bond between Jack and the mare had transcended the physical. It was a soul-deep connection, two beings who had suffered, who had endured pain, and who had found solace in each other's presence. In their struggle, Jack found his own strength. The true gift of sacrifice is not what we give away, but what we gain in return. For Jack, that gift was not just the lives of the Mare and Foal, but the ability to reclaim his own life from the shadows of his past. The act of saving another had given him the strength to save himself. Jack's journey wasn't just about fighting for the survival of the Mustangs, it was about discovering his own resilience, about finding the strength to live again after all that he had lost. And as the Mare and Foal trotted out into the fresh snow, their breaths visible in the cold air, Jack realized that the world hadn't taken everything from him. He still had something to give, a part of himself he thought he had lost forever. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack stood silently in the doorway of the barn, watching the mother and foal disappear into the distance, their silhouettes fading into the twilight. He had done something worth doing. Something that had healed him in ways he hadn't imagined. And in the quiet of that evening, surrounded by the animals he had saved and the world he had fought to protect, Jack found something he hadn't felt in years: peace. As Jack gazed at the quiet peace in the stable, the fading light of day signaling the end of another long night, he realized that his journey wasn't over yet. Saving the horses wasn't just an act of rescue, it was part of a deeper process of rediscovering himself, a journey where every step took him closer to the profound questions about sacrifice and the meaning of life. And in that moment, Jack understood that the sacrifice he had made for these creatures was, in fact, a valuable lesson for himself. The story of Jack's sacrifice serves as a profound reminder of the power of compassion in everyday life. It's not always the grand gestures or monumental actions that shape the world, but the smaller, quieter acts of kindness that ripple outwards, affecting the lives of others in ways we may never fully comprehend. Jack didn't just save a Mare and Foal, he rediscovered himself in the process, finding purpose, healing, and peace through his willingness to give of himself. This story teaches us that every act of compassion, no matter how small, can alter the course of a life. It challenges us to look beyond our own pain and fears, to see the suffering of others, and to respond with kindness and understanding. The decisions we make, especially the difficult ones, shape our paths and can be life-changing, not just for ourselves, but for others too. Sometimes, the greatest growth comes from moments of sacrifice, of choosing to give more than we thought we could. As we look back on Jack's journey, it's important to ask ourselves, how can we incorporate compassion into our daily lives? What can we do to make a meaningful difference, even in small ways? Jack's story is not just about saving animals, it's about looking deeper into ourselves and realizing that in helping others, we often help ourselves. Through kindness and sacrifice, Jack found peace and redemption, and so too can we. So, take a moment to reflect on your own life. Think about the choices you face every day and how, like Jack, you have the opportunity to choose compassion. Even the simplest act of kindness can be transformative. What are you willing to give to make the world a better place, even if it's just for one life? Jack's story invites us all to consider how our choices shape not only our lives but the lives of others. It challenges us to open our hearts and embrace the difficult decisions that lead to growth and healing. The most profound lesson Jack teaches is that true strength lies in compassion, and through compassion, we can not only change the world around us but also heal our own hearts. As you go forward, ask yourself, how will you choose to live with compassion? And in that choice, may you find not only purpose, but the peace and healing that Jack found in his journey.